It has been the case hitherto that when a single pirate has been suffered to range the seas, as not being worth the notice of a government, he has by degrees grown so powerful as to put them to the expense of a great deal of blood and treasure before he was suppressed. Captain Charles Johnson, A General History of the Pirates, 1724.
Of all the pirates who sailed the seas during the golden age of piracy, from dark-eyed Cape Putnam to Captain Archibald, one name stands out as the most notorious and influential buccaneer in history, Captain Redbeard. His career was longer than any other pirate. He captured hundreds of ships and won, lost, hunted, and hid vast fortunes over his lifetime. His list of friends was short and his list of enemies long, though they intertwined so much that it was often hard to tell whose side he was on. In this 8-part Brick Lore documentary series, we'll piece together lore from the LEGO sets, comics, audio dramas, and video games to tell the story of one of the most beloved figures in LEGO history, Captain Redbeard. As he neared middle age, which was quite old for a pirate, Redbeard had reinvented himself from a carefree adventurer into a battle-hardened villain. As the years passed, the line between Redbeard's true personality and his infamous facade began to blur. Redbeard's nobility and good-heartedness were still there, but his impulsive greediness began to overtake his better nature. Around this time, Redbeard was joined in his pirate adventures by his own children. All of them abandoned lives of privilege to become pirates. His son left behind a friendship with Tierney, a rising imperial officer, to join the crew. His daughter joined by accident after mistaking one of Redbeard's vessels for a pleasure cruise ship. Perhaps inevitably, she fell in love with the pirate life and took on the alias Miss Dagger. Her sister Argenta was nicknamed the Blade Dancer for her skill with a sword. Like her father, she obscured her warm-hearted nature in order to rise to the top of the pirate ranks. She became known first as the Pirate Princess and then as the Pirate Queen. Argenta placed herself squarely between her father and Admiral Nonsuch, who had never given up on capturing the wily pirate. She became determined to capture the Admiral first. She lost an eye in one of her many duels and began wearing a patch like the rest of her family. Nearly all of the Redbeard pirates wore eye patches. In addition to the captain and his children, Redbeard's first mate Slinger, his gunner Rummy, and even Bart, who had replaced Harry Hardtack as cook, had all apparently lost an eye at some point. This was either a testament to the dangers of a pirate's life or a staggering coincidence. Given that Rummy was later seen with his patch over the opposite eye, it's possible some pirates simply wore them to fit in. Rummy was a terrible shot, but an enthusiastic gunner. He saw artillery as the solution to many of life's problems. Redbeard's tough new attitude, combined with the loyalty of his family and crew, made him a force to be reckoned with. Where before he had been afraid to face the Admiral, soon he was battling Nonsuch and the Bluecoats head-to-head and plundering Imperial forts, even converting one to a pirate island stronghold. Over the following decade, Redbeard's reputation and influence grew. He became known as the Scourge of the Caribbean, and was often compared to the legendary pirate Pierre Lafitte, at least by those who wished to flatter the captain. Redbeard in turn inspired some of the most infamous pirates in history. His peg leg idea had been stolen by many pirates, including Long John Silver, the namesake of another of the Treasure Islands, who sailed with Edward England and later as quartermaster under Captain Flint. Blackbeard's bosun was inspired by Redbeard's hook after losing his own hand and would become known as Captain James Hook. These legendary pirates were only the first of dozens of imitators that appeared over the years. Redbeard proved to be an inspiration for every pirate who lost a hand and/or leg and/or eye, and most of them seemed to model their appearance on the pirate captain. Several of them would become involved in Redbeard's own adventures. While Redbeard's ruthless reputation was still something of a front, these pirates routinely crossed the line into outright villainy. Captain Brickbeard had much in common with Redbeard, aside from the obvious choice in name. He had taken over Pirate's Cove and had also lost his leg in a shark attack. Brickbeard's ship was the Brickbeard's Bounty. Redbeard named his own vessel the Brick Bounty not long after, which probably annoyed his rival. As Brickbeard's name suggests, original pirate nicknames were increasingly hard to come by, as evidenced by Jake Blake. While Blake was one of several pirates who had taken the name Blackbeard, he chose the more menacing moniker Ironhook after losing his hand. This was probably due to complications from malaria, which frequently put the otherwise terrifying pirate out of commission. He lost his leg as well, though he would often employ a more convincing prosthesis in place of a peg. Redbeard maintained an off and on friendship with Ironhook over the years, seeing Ironhook's lack of scruples as a potential resource. Another pirate who clearly took some inspiration from Redbeard found that all the good pirate names had been taken and was known simply as the Pirate Captain. An unlucky seafarer whose ships kept sinking, he would pillage in relative obscurity for years before taking control of the Red Pirates after their leader, the equally unimaginatively named Red Pirate, was defeated in a battle for Skeleton Bay. Even as his notoriety increased, Redbeard retained two of his fundamental personality traits: loyalty to his friends and a soft spot for children. He made good on his promise to the recently executed William Gordon Frederick Cavendish and recruited his son Will to train him as a pirate as soon as he was old enough. From this point, Redbeard was effectively Will's adopted father, and he grew to care as much for Will as any of his children. Will was nearly the opposite of Redbeard, thoughtful where Redbeard was impulsive, and selfless where Redbeard was increasingly greedy. His tutelage under brother Jeremias had given him an excellent education, and Will could often be found buried in a book. In spite of their differences, this would become a long-lasting partnership. Will's better nature would occasionally rub off on the captain, and Redbeard would sometimes act on the boy's advice. The young man had been bored on land and took to the pirate life well, even though the violence and theft did trouble his conscience from time to time. Eventually, the man who had betrayed Will's father also joined the pirates of Forbidden Island, using William Cavendish's old ship Barracuda for his own attacks. Fowl and Redbeard would cooperate on several occasions, but the two pirates despised one another. Redbeard knew that Fowl was capable of the darkest deeds, including kidnapping and betrayal of his fellow pirates, while Fowl considered Redbeard a coward for refusing to employ such methods. Although the Barracuda should have been Will's inheritance, Redbeard was careful to keep Fowl's involvement in Cavendish's death hidden from Will whenever their paths crossed. He knew that the boy wasn't ready to face such a ruthless man. Redbeard steadfastly refused to give Will any information about his parents, simply shutting down whenever Will asked questions. Will vaguely recalled attending his father's execution, but had been so young at the time that he struggled to recall even his surname. The most frequent target of the Redbeard pirates during this time remained the Bluecoat Governor Hacienda. He enjoyed collecting taxes from the settlers, and his cache of gold and diamonds proved irresistible to Redbeard. The Bluecoat soldiers hired to guard the tax revenue instead spent most of their time retrieving it from the pirates who had stolen it. When Rummy attacked one of the governor's outposts to rescue a fellow pirate and take some treasure for himself, he found both the governor and his daughter to be able opponents. Rummy was captured, and the Redbeard pirates were down 2 crewmates. Hacienda wasn't able to keep the treasure out of Redbeard's hand forever. The wily captain soon captured a chest full of valuable diamonds. Admiral Nunsuch decided to recover the treasure and put a stop to Redbeard's raids by taking his ship and putting the captain behind bars for good. This time he decided to use the pirates' own tactics against them. He sought out the assistance of Sergeant Ernest Lequet. The Lequet family was well represented in the Imperial military, but Ernest had a dark past. He had been a pirate for years until his older sister Rita Lequet, a cadet in the elite Imperial Guard, had tracked him down. After being pardoned, he joined the forces of Governor Hacienda and was more than willing to turn on his fellow pirates. The pair used the time-honored pirate tactic of using a much smaller craft to attack the formidable Brick Bounty. Redbeard was taken by surprise, and after a fierce battle, he and his crew were locked up. Nevertheless, they managed to escape Imperial justice once more. The crew later took refuge in a series of caves in Sabatina, not far from Broadside's own El Dorado fortress, the last place Bluecoats would look for them. Around this time, Redbeard changed his Jolly Roger again, swapping the crossed cutlasses for a traditional skull and crossbones. He acquired a new parrot, Popsy, who had already sailed with the crew of Captain Crossbones. A Bluecoat vessel attacked Redbeard's new fort, one that appeared to be Redbeard's old command, the Dark Shark. Redbeard was able to retake his old ship. The vessel had already had other names, including the Storm Wind, but her best-known name was the Black Seas Barracuda, a name Redbeard may have chosen to honor Will's father. Will and Rummy followed Redbeard to his new command, though Bart the cook was replaced by Flashfork, which proved to be a disappointment to the captain. Bart had been a vegetarian who nevertheless was happy to cater to Redbeard's preference for steak. Like Bart, Flashfork could whip up a stew from questionable ingredients in a pinch, but Redbeard turned up his nose at the cook's attempt to bring culinary culture to his pirate palate. The most memorable meal Redbeard had during this time was when Flashfork was sick, and a visiting German potmaker served him a dish he called a hamburger. Redbeard often led the other pirates in teasing Flashfork, and it's little wonder that they often found themselves on the wrong side of his rolling pin. Redbeard had another reason for hiding out in the caves. He was searching for a huge treasure which he eventually found. his crew celebrated the discovery with a grand party. The good times couldn't last forever. While Redbeard had recovered his most famous vessel, now known as the Black Sea's Barracuda, Governor Broadside was assigned the Iron Ran, a ship of the line whose speed and firepower outclassed any pirate vessel. Redbeard's influence was already waning, but it would be his hubris, bolstered by years of fame and success, that finally drove his once loyal family apart. The son of Redbeard was unable to grow any facial hair, and the captain's family pride drove him to disown his own son for his failure to live up to the family's now infamous reputation. This was a huge dishonor for the man now known as No Beard, especially since he had given up his relationship with Tierney to join his father's pirates. Argenta also left to serve the pirate captain before becoming a captain herself. Exiling No Beard was a move that would prove hypocritical, as Redbeard's own beard would become incredibly patchy in the years to come. Redbeard's diet consisted almost exclusively of red meat and rum. Malnutrition seems to have resulted in the loss of his defining feature. Redbeard's beard would all but vanish, and the once infamous pirate would have to remind his fellow buccaneers of his identity and status, sometimes at pistol point. Redbeard's beard wasn't the only thing to go. He had long before lost most of his teeth. While Redbeard maintained his sense of style, often wearing a black, gold-trimmed frock coat and epaulettes even in the hot Caribbean sun, he neglected his appearance and went months without bathing, a fact recorded on surviving Imperial wanted posters from the period. He also became particularly sensitive about his weight, and while pursuing treasure had been an enjoyable adventure in his younger days, in his later years it had become a full-blown mania. Now well into middle age, Redbeard was a shadow of his former self. He still had the Barracuda, but his glory days were long gone. The former scourge of the seven seas appeared to have entered the doldrums of life, but his greatest adventures were still to come.